Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 101 of the Making a Marketer podcast. I'm Megan Powers. This show is made possible by my company, Powers Marketing. We focus on strategic content creation, including podcast and event production, hosting, and emceeing. And I'm so proud of myself because usually on live shows, I forget to say my name. Welcome to my guest today, Rain Bennett. How are you?
I'm doing well. Never forget your name.
Well, it's funny because as I said that, I was looking, and normally it's our names are displaying, but they're not displaying. So,
Well, good
well,
thing you
we'll
said it.
see. We'll see what happens. Oh, it's always an adventure. My co-host Jen Cole is in the audience. Welcome, Jen. Happy Tuesday to you.
Hey,
Thanks for
Jen.
being here. Have you two met?
Oh, just I think on the
Officially?
Twitterverse.
Yeah. On the Twitter. I like to say it like that too. All right. I'm going to read, for those who don't know, Rain, I'm going to read your bio. Rain Bennett is a 2-time Emmy nominated filmmaker, writer, keynote speaker, and storytelling coach with over 15 years of experience producing documentary films. With his company, 6 Second Stories, he helps purpose driven companies and organizations create short form, heartfelt video stories to motivate their audiences to take action. His films and articles have been seen around the world, and he hosts a weekly podcast called The Storytelling Lab. His mission is simple: to teach people how to leverage storytelling to grow their communities, deepen their connections, and maximize their impact in minimal time. Now, I would have loved to have you on to talk about storytelling, especially 6 seconds. And I'll make sure to include a link to your book too.
Okay,
In the show notes. But we just had 2 guests on that talked about storytelling, and I know like no one has no one's cornered the market on how to do it or what it's all about. But I thought you have so much to share that would be interesting to like maybe talk about something a little bit different today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will say, just like stories, all of us are different, and therefore our approach to whatever we do is different, including storytelling. And so I talk to a lot of storytelling experts, and part of what my work is about is finding what your unique perspective is on the work that you do, what that is, and then who would benefit from it the most, so that you have a clear lane where you don't have competition. So none of the people that I have on my show that are keynote speakers, storytelling coaches, like exactly the same things that I do, are competitors, because we come from different backgrounds. Like I come from a documentary filmmaking perspective. They may come from, working on the marketing team at Google or something like that. And so we land on the same thing, stories, but from different perspectives. And the point is to find the people who would benefit most from my perspective, and they, I hope, find the people that would benefit most from their perspectives. And so that in that way, we can be in a position where we don't really have competition. And I think a lot of the stuff that we'll talk about today is in that realm of like clearly understanding what you do differently than someone else, so that you can kind of, fail proof, foolproof, your mission, and be able to adapt and adjust along the way, turn your story around, if you will.
For sure. So on that, we're going to talk about having how to turn your tragic flaw into your superpower. Now, anyone who's been listening to this show for a while might remember that we actually used to ask our guest as a last question, if they could have a superpower in their job, what would it be? So I am going to put that to you before we dig into it. If you could have a superpower in your job, what would it be?
Me?
Yeah.
I try to live my superpower. My superpower is connecting people most often, but really starting to connect the dots, and that is through communication. So I think the number one human skill that you can have undoubtedly is communication, because it makes all the other skills that you may possess even better. And the way we communicate as humans is, spoiler alert, stories. So I would never state that I can't constantly get better, and I'm on a quest to do so. But I don't need to know how to fly, right? I need to understand how to clearly communicate my message to my people. If what I want to do in life, my goal is to live my passion, do what I want to do for a living, and which is not always easy, right? Like I build a business around who I am as a person. Like I made a business out of that, and I want to be able to do
Right.
that. But in order to do that consistently for the long term, like I have to have a very clear line on who I help the most and how and why, and then be able to communicate that efficiently and effectively. And so that's the superpower I'm after. And it's honestly the superpower I think most people should be after, instead of something like, if you ask most people that question, they're going to want like super strength or the ability to
I
fly.
want
But it's like,
I want to fly. Make no
yeah,
mistake. I
yeah,
want
I
to
don't know
fly.
what you're going
This
to
is a
do with that.
hypothetical. This is a hypothetical. It's
What you
going to
going to
keep
do if
me
you can
out of.
fly?
I'm not going to have to sit in traffic.
Okay.
Well,
But yeah, but okay. You got that. And then what?
this was
You'll be flying
this
around
was
where
a
everybody else.
this wasn't a literal. You took it too literally.
Listen, I'm in the real world, Megan. No.
All right, fair. Okay. On that, and yes, I got my master's in communication. So this is also a passion.
Yeah, you get it.
So yeah, and let's be honest, it's poor communication is like the reason for almost all conflicts between people, between countries, between everything. If we communicate well, a task that you want someone working for you to do, for example, communicate that well and let them know what you want the outcome to be. What are we going to accomplish by doing this task? Then you're going to get better results, right?
Absolutely. And you know what? To that point, so it's also the most neglected. Like you said, if you're asking somebody to do something for you, if that person messes that up, for lack of a better expression,
Yeah.
so often our knee-jerk response is to look at like what they did wrong. And very seldomly, I think, do we say like, did I miscommunicate something? Like, how could I have been more clearer about it? Because that's, I think, where we struggle too, is communication, like storytelling, is a two-way street. It takes two to tango. So it's not just that you didn't get what I'm saying. Like, we have to really stop and ask ourselves, like, yeah, but did that only make sense in my head? And I'm expecting them to understand what's in my head? Or was I
Right.
as clear as I thought that I was? And I'll add one more thing on too about, you said the conflicts that arise, also internal conflicts. I think communication is also the source of that. Our conversations with ourselves are also
Right.
incredibly lacking at times.
Yeah, that's fair for sure. Yeah, and looking at, we all need to show ourselves some grace, but it is definitely worth we're looking inward. No question.
I mean, that's where everything starts.
Yeah.
That's where everything starts.
Yeah.
You can't do anything outwardly until you have the inward, you know, ready and settled.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, people get caught up in like stress of the moment and we got to get this right away. And then that things can start to break down
Oh,
in
absolutely.
that way. All
Absolutely.
right. So let's talk about turning a tragic flaw into a superpower. And that might be someone's tragic flaw, right? Like just asking for things without giving good direction or whatever. So what's this all about?
So, I mean, this is actually a speech and a course that I've been giving a lot over the past couple of years, and surprisingly, it became an official real estate continuing education course in Tennessee, which I was excited that realtors wanted to learn about this sort of stuff and not just like contract law. But the thing is like and I had to understand too that tragic flaw, that term is a storytelling or a writing term. So not everyone knows what that means. So very briefly, I'll just like explain what that is. And that's just that every hero or most heroes have some thing that holds them back. And it originates from Achilles, the story of Achilles, whose mother dipped him in the river Styx, held him by the heels, and everything above the heels basically was impenetrable, invincible, but that was his tragic flaw, his Achilles heel, as you heard, and the only one place that he was vulnerable. And of course, that's the place that, where he got hurt. And so we all have these, any movie that you see, there is something holding the hero back, and them getting over that thing is generally what helps them overcome the obstacle. So we all have these flaws, perceived flaws most often, or real things that we're dealing with and struggling with. And if we're not careful, we'll let the stress of those things, or the limits and the compartments that we put them in, like I am just this, right? We'll let them hold us down forever. We'll never be able to accomplish what we want to accomplish. But if you can look at that and reframe that limiting belief and look at the opportunity that lies within that flaw, there's a lot of ways that you can leverage that to turn that obstacle into an opportunity. And this is really hard to do when the stuff hits the fan and you're in stress mode. Like, it's really hard to calm down and look at things objectively and be like, what's the lesson here, right? And I get that, but there's a path that we can take to get there, and there's steps that we can actionably take to achieve that. And it's been done time and time again, where people can take this thing that holds them back, rearrange their approach to their work, and then not just like make it out, but massively benefit from that new perspective, because they're not trying to fit in some mold that just wasn't made for them in their situation.
So what are some steps that you would recommend?
Well, the first step, I think, is to, one, you just got to keep going, right? When we hit, this is on the top of everyone's minds, because, like, let's call it the elephant in the room, not elephant in the room, but the obvious statement. Like, we've all been traumatized over the past 2 years with the pandemic. So everybody's suffering, right? Collectively. And lots of people's businesses have been negatively impacted in a major way. So when that happens, often we just want to give up. We're just going to run and hide in the corner and cry, blame it on something else, and just complain about it. And so the first thing that we have to do is, like, keep going, and just do something. Don't just give up. Understand that your story's not over. You're just in the middle part of the story, which is the tough part, the messy middle, the dark forest of the fairy tale, right? And that's not how your story's going to end, which is how we often think of it. And so the first step, however, if you can picture yourself in a pit, right? And when you're in a pit and you're digging, trying to get yourself out of that, like, and you're just working frantically, what are you doing? You're digging yourself deeper into that pit. You don't see that because you're like blindsided. You're just like, I gotta get out of here. So you're digging. And meanwhile, you're just getting deeper. So you have to kind of pause that, and you can't just work your way out of it, and stop and look at things objectively and do something different. Like, that's so simple. Most of these steps are so simple, but just, you have to change what you're doing. A lot of times we dig our heels in. We won't change because this is how we've always done things. And if we work hard enough, we'll work through it. And almost always that's not the truth. So the very first thing is just stop doing what you're doing and do something differently, which, again, sounds so crazy easy, right? But most of these things always are. They're just so simple and so right in front of our face that we look past them because we expect it to have to be this, like, super hard thing to get out. I was like, just stop doing what you're doing and maybe think about, like, what if you did it this way? But again, people are naturally, like, they kind of reject that thing. Like, well, no, this is the way you do it. I'm like, well, that's not working out for you, buddy.
Right. Very good. Yeah, I think that's great advice for everyone, like, in every part of life. Just take a beat, look at what, maybe rethink how to approach versus plowing straight ahead.
Oh, definitely. And then you get to the point where you said rethink, and this makes me think of a reframing exercise that I use with people. And it's simply like, and I did this exercise myself when I was really in what I call the pit 5 years ago or so. Just a 2-column, line down the middle of a piece of paper, and on one side, like, a limiting belief, and just let them all flow, like all the limiting beliefs that you have, the negative self-talk that you have. And on the right side, like, a reframed thought of that. Like, how can I switch, like, flip the script and change my perspective on that and look at that differently? One of my favorite examples of this is, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. So, and I grew up an athlete. And so during that time, Mike Tyson was, the biggest name in boxing and arguably in sports. We had Michael Jordan and Mike Tyson at the same time. So Mike Tyson, who is still regarded as one of the all-time greats, never thought he would be one because he was way shorter than anyone that he saw that was an all-time great. Like, think Muhammad Ali, who I think was like 6'3", 6'4", something like that, because you always hear about reach, like, long arms, tall boxers. He was like 5'10", maybe 5'11", still very short compared to a lot of his competitors. So he thought that he would never be able to do any damage or get his jab to work because they're so much taller than him. He and his trainer Customato developed a style where he would actually stay in close, slipping the jabs, moving a lot, and learn how to throw his punches from extremely unique angles, like sometimes almost from the floor instead of standing upright trying to play on their level playing field. He'd get down here. Now if he was way down here, also those tall guys couldn't reach him a lot of times, and then he would come up with this like infamous uppercut that he had. And even though he had insane power, a lot of the times the reason he knocked out his opponents was because he hit them with punches that weren't seen, because he was shooting from these unique angles. This became his signature style and why he's still regarded as one of the all-time greats. But it started from a tragic flaw, this thing that he thought that would forever hold him back from being a great. And all he didn't change anything in his body. He didn't get taller, right? All he did was change the way he looked at it, with the help of course of a mentor or a guide or a trainer in this case.
Right. Coach. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. To understand it, like, no, you can't fight that orthodox style where you're standing upright and your hands are here. You got to stay low and stay moving in. So that's one of my favorite examples because it defined him. That style defined him. But his talk the whole time was, I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm a shorter man, and I never understood why like society sometimes sees like there are flaws, pros and cons to whatever like hands you are dealt. You just have to see them that way. Like when I see a super tall person, yeah, can they reach something like on the higher shelf than me? Sure. But are they faster than me? Most likely not. If I'm playing
Right.
basketball with them, are they going to get the rebound that falls to the ground? Like I'll get it before it bounces back up high. You just got to play what hand you're dealt, but understand the leverage that your hand gives you. Like that's the biggest thing, is we think we all have to have the same set of tools to be successful, and you absolutely don't. You just have to rethink the way you're using the tools that you have.
I love that. Yeah, and I'm vertically challenged myself. I'm
Right
5'2".
on.
And but it's funny too, because people will see me like doing things for myself and they're like, oh, I can help you. And I'm like, I got this. Like
Right.
I live every day having to figure out how to get something down from somewhere high or how to put something up, like all those things. So
Mhm.
so yeah, like I've lived my life kind of like,
And you see it with
doing that.
with organizations. You'll see it too. Like I'll give a classic example. This will be very quick. All right, big massive organization versus like smaller organization. The smaller one can, you would think they can't compete with the big one with all the money and all the team, et cetera, et cetera. But the small one is much more malleable and flexible and able to pivot on a dime. Like you can't turn this big, massive ship, this cruise ship, but a 20-foot, ski boat, you can zip all over the place, right? So it's just different things, understanding your goals and understanding the tools that you have and how to effectively use them. So in the pandemic, being a nimble, smaller business was probably better in a lot of ways than being a giant business whose business model was set up to do this thing and this thing only for years. And then this thing was taken away from you. Now you're like, oh crap, what do we do? Whereas if you're an independent, you can be like, oh, well, maybe we can think of something else that we can do. And you can make that decision today and take action on it tomorrow.
Right. Yeah, I guess it depends on what industry you're into. Meetings and events and hospitality took the biggest hits, I think. But yeah, but I like that perspective.
Well, I'll give you a quick example there. My brother
Yeah.
is a caterer and did 95% weddings, maybe 90%. So lost hundreds of thousands of dollars because all weddings ceased, right? And so they started thinking like, well, what do we really do for people? We're not in the wedding industry. We're in the, he did like gourmet comfort food, basically. His tagline is Carolina cuisine. We're in North Carolina, Carolina cuisine with a California twist. And so when we started thinking about what they really do, which is to provide healthy, but also really tasty comfort food, he figured out another way and started doing family dinners, right? And that was a lifeline that kept them going. Now that the weddings have come back, you've got the family dinners and the weddings back, right? So it's a way to also kind of mitigate those risks along the way, but still you can think about what you really do for people and then think of another creative way to deliver those results. If you stay rigid, like we are a wedding catering company, then yeah, you're dead in the water. But if you start understanding the thing that you really provide isn't wedding food, then you can
Right.
adjust. Again, it's all mental.
No, for sure. And I had a restaurant client at the time, and they didn't want to do takeout. They don't, there were all these things I was trying to help them, and they were just not having it. And so yeah, so I hear that
You
for
get it?
sure.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I know plenty of examples of it. Like, actually, in fact, my other podcast is called Trade Show Talk, y'all. So if you want to check it out, Trade Show Talk by TSNN is the sponsor, or is the company that I'm doing it for. It's Women's History Month. This is actually International Women's Day,
That's
so
right.
happy International Women's Day. Um, but both of them, I had them on. It's called Trade Show Talk. It's about the meetings and events industry. But they are two women who thrived in spite of COVID. And one of them, Jessica Shea, she did that. She's like, we do event we do these spectacular events that don't necessarily translate to Zoom, but we want to bring the fun in. And so she created this company called Cheers in a Box. And so now they are providing these gift boxes that can be shipped to people. And if they want, they can have an online experience with it. They can learn how to make cocktails, or how to design a grazing board, or whatever, or do their favorite things. Anyway, she created this incredible business, which she wouldn't have done
Yeah,
had
that's
not
incredible.
had that not
See,
all.
I love that. Those stories to me are the most inspiring, right? Because this concept of overcoming obstacles and turning your story around, like, obstacles are inherent to any, like, you have to have them for there to be a story. So these things aren't going to stop happening. They might not be as massive as a global pandemic, but there's always going to be things thrown your way. Always going to be problems to overcome. We're never going to be able to avoid that. So learning how to adapt and adjust to those problems is really the skill outside of communication, right? That people need to learn if they're going to effectively be able to turn their story around and not get caught in that messy middle and never be able to dig out of it.
Yeah, for sure. So tell us about the 6 second story. Can you tell a story in 6 seconds?
Yeah, you can. I mean, it's so the goal of any story is to tell it efficiently, like as efficiently as possible, to get to, connecting people. To do it in 6 seconds is really challenging. And so you have to reduce it down to the bare bones of what a story is. And a story is simply before and after. A transformation has to happen. So you don't have time for the messy middle, the act two. You just have to go from, like, this is where I was, this thing happened, and now this is where I was. And the goal of that, as when I was looking at the space, 6 second ads started becoming really popular. YouTube bumper ads. Now 6 seconds is an ad format on, like, primetime television as well. But especially we see it online. And it's easy to do something visual, flashy in 6 seconds. It's easy to make people laugh, to make a little joke, like think Vine, right, in 6 seconds.
Right.
It's very, very challenging to connect with, which is what I do in my storytelling and filmmaking. The stories that I tell are always like heartfelt human stories, and the businesses that I work with have those types of stories to tell. It's hard to make someone like emotional or make someone cry in 6 seconds. You think of your favorite Super Bowl spots that do that. They're like long, they're like a
Right.
minute long. And so it's really challenging, but to do that, you have to really understand, like, what makes a story, and how to do that very quickly when you don't have a lot of time. Now that we're all tasked with connecting with people with very limited time, and there's a quick misconception, there's this, like, stat about goldfish having an 9 second attention span, and ours are shorter than that at 8 seconds or something like that. And I don't think that's exactly right. I don't think that it's that our attention spans are, like, shorter. I think that the demand for our attention is much greater, and we can sniff out BS much faster. And so if I see something that I immediately don't resonate with, I'm done with it. I'm on to the next thing. Whereas 50 years ago, all I had was the brand new television, right? And that's all I could watch. But now there's so much competition for my attention, I can skirt past it until I see that one thing that's like, hey, did you just lose your job as a restaurant worker? Here's something that, helped us out. Now, if that was me and it resonated with me, I'm all ears, because I need help and I need to know the rest of that story. So you just have to catch them very quickly. You don't have any time to do it. And the way to do that is to connect with where they're struggling.
Yeah, I think is the memory of a goldfish. And like Ted Lasso says, be a
Mm,
goldfish. Ted Lasso's. Did you watch Ted
yeah,
Lasso?
yeah,
Okay. So yeah, be a goldfish. I love that saying. Like, in other words, sometimes though, like forget what the thing was and move on. Like, it's sometimes that the remembering stuff isn't gonna help you move forward. Right.
yeah.
All right. So 6 seconds. So your book, Jen. So also Jen said adaptation is a superpower. I would say for sure.
Agreed.
And then of course she said she loves Ted Lasso. Believe. All right. So your book. Talk about your book and like what are we going to get from this?
So the book takes two things: the timeless tool that we've always had access to in terms of communication, which is storytelling. This is currently, the past few years, been like a marketing buzzword, but it's not something brand new. And to put it as simply as I possibly can, it is the way humans communicate. It's the way we've always communicated. We don't communicate through lists of data. We communicate through narratives. Our brains are designed to digest information that way. I don't need to go off into the weeds about the neuroscience behind it. You can look it up yourself, but it's proven. This is the way we've always communicated. Now we have this massive tool that you and I are using right now, video, which I think it's like 85% of online traffic or something currently is video. And people will play video. The reason why it's so powerful is because person to person is always going to be the most powerful in making a human connection. The very next under it, because we still see each other's faces, is video. So you're marrying these two things, storytelling and video. That's what I do. That's what I've made my career off of. However, I don't want to say almost everybody, but many, many people will look to the video aspect. What camera do I need? What apps do we need to be on? What mobile editing apps do I need that's going to make the best thing? Yada, 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 yada. Putting the cart before the horse, not knowing how to clearly communicate their messages. So my whole thesis, the whole philosophy of the work that I do and of this book is that you have all the tools you need to start right now. Don't get analysis paralysis or shiny object syndrome. Start with what you have and cultivate the skill of storytelling to communicate your messages. Then, if all you have is a smartphone, that's where you start. Once you get
Right.
better, you add tools to the toolbox. But so many people look for the tool to make their job easier instead of harnessing the skill that you can then apply to any tool that you have. And that's the order I put things in first: learning how to tell stories and then learning how to use video to do so in a powerful way in 2022.
I love that. Yeah. Well, and start with why too. Like, why are you
Yeah.
doing it? Like,
Yeah.
what are
Big
you what are
time.
you
Big time.
what are you trying to accomplish? And
Yeah.
then yeah, I think
So
you're
many
right.
people
People get
don't
held up.
do that work first, which is
Right.
it's hard in a lot of ways, but it's simple because it's you should have the answers. And it may take a little while to get to them. You may have to tap into here and here a little bit, but they're there. You don't have to go research anything for those answers, just yourself, which again, it's not always easy. And that's maybe why people are resistant to doing that and just looking for like, well, what's the thing I need to buy to do it? And it's like, your work is never going to be easy. Not if you're doing real work. It may be fun and it may not feel like manual labor, but if you're doing good work, like it's gonna be work. You're gonna have to learn how to cultivate a skill that takes time, that takes practice, that takes passion, right?
Right.
And I think understanding how to communicate, as we said at the very beginning of our conversation, that is going to carry on over to any other skill that you then acquire.
Yeah, for sure. I love that we came full circle on that. That's great.
That's
All
storytelling,
right.
baby.
That's right. All right. So I asked you, we love for our guests to share a book a business book that they are into. So what's a business book that's not your own that our listeners should check out?
So there's a long list, but I will say in the vein of what we've been talking about today, Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art. This is all about the resistance, as he calls it, which is a lot of the stuff that we're talking about today, is working through this imposter syndrome, any of these limiting beliefs that we talked about. Now, it's a play on words, right? We all know the art of war, and this is called The
Right.
War of Art. Stephen Pressfield is a master of like both fiction and nonfiction, one of my favorite authors. And there's a lot in that realm that he writes, but that's probably That's one of his most well-known fiction books, The War of Art. And they're all short reads, but it'll change your perspective on the work that you do in the world. I promise you that.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'll have to check that one out. I love when it's a new one that I don't already have that a guest
Yeah.
recommends.
Yeah. And his writing style is really great. There's a lot of those short little books that talk about this sort of things that he has. There's a whole series, and they're all very effective.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, thanks, Rain. I'm really
Thank
happy
you.
that we can make this happen. And we will include his book recommendations and a link to his book in the show notes, of course. And I'm really grateful that we could have you on.
Thanks so much. I want to add something for the listeners. If you do buy the book,
Yeah.
just send me a receipt, show me, and I'll send you a free signed copy too, so that you can, the one that you bought, you can give it to someone that you think would benefit from it, and then I'll just give you one signed from me for free if you do that.
I love it. That's amazing. Thank you. And his Twitter is at Rain Bennett. 2 N's, 2 T's.
2 N's, 2 T's. I was saying earlier today that my mom did a really good job naming me. There are not a lot of Rain Bennett's out there, folks. So if you are interested in connecting, I promise you, if you Google my name, you'll find me.
Fantastic. And Jen said, such a great show today. Thanks, Jen, for being here. And thank you for everyone who watched us live, who watches the replay, who's listening on the podcast. We appreciate you. If you haven't yet, we would love it if you would rate and review us on your podcast platform of choice so that we get heard by more people. All right, friends, this has been episode 101 of the Making a Marketer podcast, and we will catch you